Hello, everyone. Logan Hertz here with Hazeltine LLC. We're joined by Clayton. DeAndre, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, Logan? How you feeling?
I'm doing all right. Don't ask me how I'm feeling. I don't want to answer that
Well,
question.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm soldiering on as usual.
Oh man.
But we're gonna do this thing. We're gonna do this thing. You don't need to know what it costs me to do this thing. We're gonna do it. So the show must go on. I want to take this opportunity to talk a bit frankly about some of the drawbacks to velocity banking, because I think there are misrepresentations of it, just like with the infinite banking concept, which I do believe in both strategies. For some reason, velocity banking seems to get a lot more responses and negative responses than infinite banking. I'd like to be talking more about infinite banking because I'm not really a velocity banking expert. That's not really what I do, although it is a complementary strategy. There are people out there who really velocity banking is their primary focus. But I wanted to bring in DeAndre because he's really the expert on velocity banking. And before I get to one of the critics and what he posted on my channel, which I didn't really disagree with any of the points that he made, I would maybe nuance them. But one of the things that you'll see with velocity banking critics is they try to narrow it down to first lien HELOC versus mortgage. And what they'll do is they take the same cash flows and apply it to a mortgage as you would to a first lien HELOC. And look, the mortgage gets paid off faster. See, you velocity banking people are being dishonest because you're making more payments to the first HELOC. So of course it gets paid off faster. What they're basically saying is don't do velocity banking. And now let's compare a first lien HELOC to a mortgage. And if you do that, of course the mortgage is going to win because the first lien HELOC is just a tool. It's not the strategy. The mortgage is just a tool. Used properly, either could be good. I'll give you an example of how velocity banking can work. I had a case recently of a business owner. He has $73,000 in credit card debt. He has a mortgage and he has a fair amount of equity in his home. He also has $50,000 sitting in cash, and he needs that because he's a business owner. That's his emergency savings, his safe liquid capital. He needs that $50,000. We cannot take the $50,000 and just pay off the credit cards. He needs that money liquid and accessible. So what are we going to do? Probably what we're going to do is take out a second position HELOC on his primary residence and pay off the $73,000 of credit card.
Mm-hmm.
Right away, there's a benefit there because probably we've reduced the interest rate from say 18% to 8 or 9%, whatever that HELOC is. In addition, we can now take that $50,000 in cash and drop it into the HELOC and pay off that balance by $50,000. Why can we do that? Because the HELOC is a two-way street. So I can now pay down $50,000 of high interest rate debt with losing the liquidity. That's the key point. You couldn't apply that $50,000 safely to the debt if you were not using velocity banking. So if we're going to compare our first lien HELOC to a mortgage, we're really using velocity banking. What we would have to do is, let's say the mortgage is $300,000. We'd have to give the first lien HELOC a $50,000 head start. So it would start with a $250,000 balance instead of $300,000. Now we can drop our savings into it. And we'd probably apply at least $500, maybe $1,000 of extra cash flow to the first lien HELOC, because what velocity banking allows us to do is to safely throw more money at that debt. It always comes back to assumptions. In many ways, the velocity banking critics are doing the same things that they accuse velocity banking people of doing, which some of them are doing, which is running numbers, but the assumptions behind the numbers miss the point. I'll stop there for a second, DeAndre.
About velocity banking not having to be the first lien HELOC, it doesn't even have to be a HELOC. It could be personal line of credit, a 0% interest credit card. So whatever the guy is saying, if you run the math with 0%, that will always win. Velocity banking would always win in that scenario. So the question would be not only what is the tool, but how is the tool being utilized? Am I blanketing debt, or am I just sitting enough debt on there that I always get my budget back down to zero every month? Because if I'm sitting debt anywhere that charges interest, but I erase the debt by the end of the month, velocity banking would still win. Yeah.
The problem is they don't really define what they mean by velocity
Right.
banking. And I think this is true of both the critics and
Right.
some of the proponents, because I said in another video, if you take your normal spending and you run it through a credit card, that gives you 2% cash back and you're always paying it off on time. To me, that's just common sense. And I was doing that anyway, but that is velocity banking, because velocity banking to me is not about debt payoff necessarily. It's running your cash flow through a more efficient vehicle, a debt instrument rather than a checking account. So if I run my cash flow through a 2% rewards earning credit card, I'm now getting 2% cash back on all those purchases without changing anything that I'm doing and without paying any interest. And the interest rate on that credit card might be 21%, but I'm not paying any interest because I'm paying it off every month. So let's go through some of the comments that I have not gone through yet. So this will be somewhat dangerous. We'll see how this goes. This guy's name is CMOS. And here he's commenting on our little fun video on velocity banking is a scam. First lien HELOCs are evil, because I know they are. So he says, your comment at about 7:15 about velocity banking critics living on spreadsheets is rather interesting, because I would have to say that velocity banking advocates are living on their whiteboards. They are running numbers too. Speaking for myself, when I run the numbers on a spreadsheet on the examples given by velocity bankingers, I run them accurately, completely, and apples to apples with the VB example in the given video. I've watched hundreds of velocity banking videos, and I've never seen a velocity banking example run all the way out by the velocity banking guru claiming velocity banking saved tons of money and time over other strategies. There's never a direct comparison to alternative debt acceleration strategies, just a claim that it's better. The only comparison they do is to the original full-term payout on a debt. All debt acceleration strategies will win versus the original full-term debt payoff. Viewers seeking answers to paying debt off most effectively want to know the best, fastest, least costly, and safest way to do it. This is not what is presented on nearly every VB channel. I say nearly because I haven't seen them all. I believe this is my first exposure to your thoughts on the subject. Looking forward to seeing more.
Okay.
It's hard for me to comment because I don't know which videos he's watched. Certainly, it's probably accurate. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if there's a whole lot I can respond to there. I'm sure there are people that are not running it correctly or not showing alternatives.
The other part is, how long do you want a video to be?
It's true.
At some point, you also have to realize that if every single scenario is out there, this video could end up being a 6-hour video very easily.
It's true.
You know, picking and choosing different debt tools, different debt strategies. So most people who are running the videos, if their focus is velocity banking and trying to help people to understand how to do that, it's probably just an easier story to focus on what the person is doing right now versus then the focus on right now versus velocity banking versus this versus that versus this versus that versus this. Not to say that there's not legitimacy of any of those things, but that may be the reason why you're not seeing those types of videos.
Yeah, I agree with you. I try to stay high level and conceptual. The more you get into details, the more you just confuse the audience, and we couldn't possibly address every single nuance. That doesn't mean we're not aware of them.
Right.
It just means it's not the best use of our time to go into them. That's where we would do that in a consultation if we're talking to a specific person. Then we have a little exchange. He says, you really should check them out. One, it would directly answer your question about why there is so much animosity direct towards velocity banking promoters. It's extremely well-deserved in most cases, and I fully understand the passion behind their efforts, though in no way condone those making comments getting in the gutter to do so. There's plenty of solid material to debate and expose in a civil matter for the benefit of all viewers. Two, it's your reputation on the line too. Though you might not focus on velocity banking, a good portion of your content discusses or crosses paths with it. Bad actors in any field, financial, medical, legal, etc., drag down and taint the good actors. I would posit that the good actors have a special responsibility to call out those poisoning this area of financial discussion and protect unwary viewers from massive harm. And you all have the platform to do so. The question is, will you? So I definitely disagree with him here. Look, I'm not going to get into the whack-a-mole game of trying to correct other people. That's a losing game. That is a loser's game. I'm not doing that. I'm just going to promote the good stuff. I'm going to promote the truth, what I know to be good on my channel. I'm not going to waste my time going after other people on their channels. I don't have any moral responsibility whatsoever for what they're doing. It's a total waste of my time and effort. I'd be an egomaniac if I'm going to make myself the policeman of the world and go police all these other channels and correct them. No. And not only is it not good, it would not be helpful to my audience because all I'm going to do is introduce confusion.
Yep.
I see this a lot with infinite banking where I really don't spend any time answering objections to infinite banking because it does not help educate anyone.
Right.
It just sows more confusion because always those objections have behind them some misunderstanding of what infinite banking is. All you really have to do is keep coming back to a simple, clear definition of what the infinite banking concept is, and then all those supposed objections fall away. With regard to velocity banking, I think there's a similar thing going on. I would also say the purpose of my channel is to make money. I'm here running a business. I'm not running a charity. And my response back to you, and this is not sarcasm, is if you'd like me to do that project for you, if you're willing to pay me enough to make it worth my time, maybe I would be willing to do that. But I don't have this utopian vision of the world that you do. And my non-sarcastic response to you is, why don't you do that? Why don't you set up your own website, your own channel, and start going through what your proposed alternative would be? That I think would be more helpful than just correcting all the errors on velocity banking out there. It comes back to definitions. If you define velocity banking correctly as just running your cash flow through a more efficient vehicle, a debt tool, I don't see how anyone can disagree with that. That doesn't mean, like any other strategy, it won't be misused and it won't be misappropriated by people in order to make money.
Yeah, very good point. I wrote an article about grifters. I try my best to stay away from seeming like a grifter. Anybody who paints that they're the only person who is right and they go after people, if you have to increase your own celebrity or profile by tearing others down, you have a lack of value in your own self. If you can't carry a platform by yourself, talking about what you do and understanding strategies and speaking about them to help others, and your number one thing is you post a video and react to it and tear whoever down, that says more about you than the person you're covering. And that's just my nature in general. Now, the other part that I'll also state is, does a person being inefficient mean a bad actor? What do I mean by that?
Right.
Velocity banking is trying to help people get out of debt. If a person's perfect at it or not, or what they're teaching, we can still man the argument. They're inefficient. Is what they're trying to accomplish a bad thing? Is it bad for them to try to help people get out of debt? No, absolutely not. Now, they may be inefficient, but bad, no, I would not say that. Case in point, I am not a fan of Dave Ramsey. The idea of what he's trying to do, getting people out of debt, I can rock with it. Do I think it's fully efficient? Not efficient. I think it's common sense. If you eat rice and beans and you get rid of every expense and don't do anything in your life, that, yeah, you're going to be able to pay off whatever debts you have. I understand that. But do I think it's sustainable? No. I don't think he's bad because of it. Does he have bad takes? Absolutely. So.
Yeah. I like what you're pointing out because it's interesting how the critics always have to bring in the moral dimension. That is a huge red flag to me. We're having a disagreement over what's the most efficient financial strategy. There is no moral content in that whatsoever.
No.
So why would you assume that the person is being devious and evil and manipulative? Maybe they genuinely are trying to do the right thing, but they're not understanding the mathematics correctly, or they haven't gone deep into all of the numbers. Or maybe they know something you, Mr. Critic, do not know because they're working with clients on a regular basis. I could criticize Dave Ramsey because I can show you on a spreadsheet that debt snowball is slower at paying off debts than other methods, but I don't do that because Dave Ramsey understands the psychology of being in debt. The question is not which strategy looks best on paper, but which one actually works with human psychology. And that's why I go back to my previous comment when I say these people are living on their spreadsheets. If they were interacting with clients on a regular basis like we are, they would probably have a different opinion because they would understand the numbers can only go so far. At the end of the day, what matters is your ability to execute.
Yeah.
They're missing the psychological benefits to velocity banking when you start increasing your cash flow efficiency. To quote DeAndre Clayton, one of the great things about the first lien HELOC is that it's encouraging. Your income goes in and you see your home equity balance go down. That's something you don't see with a mortgage. And I'm not against mortgages. Mortgages are totally fine. They can be a great tool. Caleb Gilliam says a lot of great things to say about 30-year mortgages. One of the drawbacks is 3 years in, you look at your principal balance, it's hardly moved on your mortgage because most of your payments have been going to interest. There is a psychological aspect to that. I agree with you. Why would you assume someone is evil just because they're proposing a financial strategy that you know to be less efficient? Okay, so then let's argue on the merits. Let's not assume people are evil or call them names. Which he's not calling people names. I'll give him credit. This is one of the more intelligent, better critics that I've seen. That's why I'm showcasing him, because I like a lot of what he said. Then he says, I 100% disagree about just ignoring bad content. Real people trying to do the right things with their real money are getting seriously hurt by the misinformation and outright lies presented by velocity banking gurus on YouTube through other channels. Okay, let me stop right there. Well, then why don't you go and help those real people? Instead of tearing down the velocity banking gurus, why don't you go and find the real people who are getting hurt and help them? You're not doing that. You're instead going after the gurus. So if you really had this compassion, this bleeding heart for these people who are getting taken advantage of, you would go and help them. That's what I do. I get people who have been hurt by other financial professionals or who are about to get hurt by other financial strategies, and I'm able to actually help them. Many times I don't make any money when I do that because it's too late, but I do the best that I can to help them. That's what I'm doing. So why don't you go and do that? But you're not. Okay. And then he says, most of these real people seeking to learn what to do with their money do not have the technical knowledge to distinguish between good and bad information. Okay. Let me stop there. That's extremely condescending and arrogant for you to say these people are stupid. That's what you're saying, is these people are stupid and ignorant. Well, that's not a problem with the velocity banking guru, is it? You're saying these people are too stupid to know what to do. That's pretty condescending. I don't treat people that way. In my experience, people are not stupid. The reason why they make bad financial decisions is because we all have emotions, we all have attachments, we all have original sin, we're not robots. And it can be difficult to find good information. I don't think people are stupid. Okay. Then he says, they find in these public forums, I know when I'm looking to learn something on YouTube in an area I'm not familiar with, I am very interested in seeing what commenters have to say so I can weigh it for myself. There's nothing moral about staying silent in these circumstances. What's highly immoral are the velocity banking gurus who block critical commentary of their videos, preventing their viewers from even knowing their opposing thoughts and claims. Okay. Your view of morality is very skewed. There's nothing immoral about people blocking your commentary. It might not be what you want, but it's their channel. They can do what they want. When I was criticizing The Wealthy Accountant because of his hit piece on infinite banking, I commented on his website and he removed those comments. I don't accuse him of doing anything immoral. It's his website. He can do what he wants. That's fine. I'm going to tell people that he blocked or didn't publish my comments, but there's nothing immoral about that. That's just your myopic view of morality, which is very strange. There's nothing moral about staying silent. We'll take that to his logical conclusion. Then I'm going to have to speak up every time anyone on any channel does anything wrong. There's no end to that. Staying silent is almost always the right thing to do. Or like my case, actually promoting the truth rather than trying to tear down other people.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
So a few things. I would be interested in actual data that suggests that.
Right.
I don't know of any data that presents that velocity banking is hurting people. It has a possibility to, by variable interest rates, by people's financial habits changing while they're on the journey of velocity banking, and maybe they get a little irresponsible buying houses and cars and all kinds of stuff. That doesn't make the information invalid. I get heat for it on LinkedIn all the time. I do believe that psychology is the number one thing that we should consider when consulting with anyone. full stop. I don't think it's theory of how well something could work. There are times when a person wants to get first lien HELOC or something like that, and I tell them, I don't think it's going to work for you because here isn't connected with what the first lien HELOC will do, right? If we take that same thing to conclusion, I want to know how moral of his arguments are against individuals who promote buy, term, and invest the difference. Look at the data surrounding buy, term, and invest the difference and see that the average American fails at it. You can look at the data and see that no other country uses buy, term, and invest the difference, and their retirees are all doing better than American retirees, right? So you can take that approach of when you want to be moral or not, but does your morality really come into place when you have certain biases?
Yeah, and I think he's engaging in projection when he's accusing the velocity banking gurus of using this emotionally charged language. Maybe they are, but that's also what you're doing because you're bringing in the moral dimension. We're having a discussion about what's the right financial strategy. Why are you bringing in the moral dimension? Except to increase the emotions to get people angry and distracted from the actual case in front of you. And if you're really so concerned about morality, then go find these people who have been victimized by velocity banking gurus and help them. That would be where you should focus. But that's what DeAndre and I are doing. We are actually meeting with clients on a regular basis. We see these people. You don't, but we do. We do talk to them. I've definitely seen people who were trying to do some sort of velocity banking. And the reason why they get hurt is usually because they try to do it themselves instead of engaging with a Denzel Rodriguez or DeAndre Clayton who can help them do it the right way. But again, it depends how you define velocity banking. That's really the question. You may have done it elsewhere, but I haven't heard him define what velocity banking is, because if you define it the way that I did, I don't see how anyone can argue against it. But are there people who have YouTube channels who are using half-truths in order to push velocity banking and make money? Probably. But why would you choose to focus on that? Instead, why don't you build your alternative strategy and start promoting that? That would be more helpful to the public.
I just say, where's the actual data? It's an inference that there's a ton of people who are hurting from it. When we took away the inference and we said, what's the data surrounding 30-year mortgages, for instance? If we wanted to go, that is a lot more damning than what he's talking about. There's actual foreclosures. There's over 100,000 just in the first quarter of 2023. So if you want to really walk that down about what's doing more damage versus another, high credit card debt and mortgages, the data behind that is ridiculous. There's not much data that a person is practicing velocity banking or has a first lien HELOC and got foreclosed on. There ain't even that many foreclosures for you to come to that conclusion. So I'm just curious where that comes from.
Yeah, agreed. And he's saying people are too stupid to tell the difference between good information and bad information. Those people will be vetted out of a good velocity banking process. In the first consultation, you will learn the strategy is not for you. If you don't have the capacity to understand it, then we're not going to do it. So again, but it's also shows his attitude. If people are too stupid, then probably nothing's going to help them. Maybe this guy can help them. So I responded and he says, well, not much I can personally do about the Fed or the IRS. And just because the damage done by velocity banking or spreading misinformation is causing people to lose money is much smaller by comparison, doesn't mean they should be given a free pass to continue doing so. Then I can do something about it. I think you're overestimating your ability to do something.
Crazy.
I don't see how this is doing. If this is your idea of doing something, again, I'm not being sarcastic. Start your own channel, or your own website, start your own business. If you really have compassion for these people that you've never identified, but maybe hypothetically, there are some people out there who are getting damaged or misled by velocity banking, why don't you go and help them? And if the problem, as you said, is really that they're too stupid to separate good information from bad information, then I don't really see what you can do to help them. If the problem is that they're too stupid, which is what you're saying.
Yeah,
But I was just pointing out the lack of proportionality, right? Why do you get so enraged over velocity banking and ignore much bigger problems out there?
yeah. He can do something about it. Can he do something about property values? Can he do something about that? Because if we look at just a traditional setup, mortgages, I met with a client. His mortgage went from 1,200 to 2,200 in a year because his property value went up. What debt tool are you using for him to manage an additional $1,000 on his mortgage? Do you have control over that? Do you have control over if one of their family members got really sick and they took a lot of money out to do whatever they needed to do and refinanced into a traditional mortgage to add another 30 years? We can go on and on about the different scenarios that can happen in a person's life. None of us have control over that, velocity bankers included.
And it seems to me that he's mostly interested in winning an argument, not at all interested in actually finding and helping the
Right.
people that he claims have been hurt by velocity banking or about to get hurt by velocity banking. If that's really what you want to do is help those people, then great, go do that. But what you're doing here is just trying to win an argument. And maybe you can win the argument, but that's a different goal.